Hey guys, I'm Andrew Davidson, and welcome back to another As Per My Ability video. If you like what we do here on As Per My Ability, if you like our videos, if you like our content, if you like board games in general, please do all the fun YouTube stuff, comment, like, subscribe. We appreciate everything that you guys do to help our channel grow. Also, make sure to hit the bell so you get notifications when we post new videos. I heard through the grapevine that if you hit the bell, you get 7 years good luck, but you'll never know unless if you click the bell. So thank you for joining us today. Today, I'm sitting down with kind of a new friend of mine, Patrick, who is one half, I suppose, of the Level Up Board Game Podcast. Now, before we get started, before I kind of bring Patrick into the situation, I'd like to be upfront with everyone that watches my show. I do have some, is it skin in the game? Is that a correct term?
I think that's fair.
That?
Yeah.
I do have some skin in the game. I do contribute to a segment on the Level Up Board Game Podcast that is called the Academy segment that goes up probably about once a month, I would say.
Every other episode, every other regular episode. Yes.
Every other regular episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's basically what I've been doing for those of you that have been on my website or been on my blog. Some of the history and game ideas that I've been messing around with on my blog there, I've kind of turned that into an audio recording, and I've been giving it to those guys, Patrick and Scott, to put on their show every other regular episode. What's a non-regular episode? What does that mean?
We have regular episodes every other week, and then we'll have a side quest, as we call it, which is sometimes it's an interview with the designer of a live Kickstarter. We have one in the works that's going to be board gaming terminology, and it's something that it just doesn't quite fit into a regular episode or with a designer interview. It just goes too long to have a second half of the show be an hour and a half. So we sort of block it into its own thing. Our regular episodes don't say side quest at the start.
Okay. So yeah, again, so this is one half of the team on the Level Up Board Game Podcast. I'm here with Patrick. So Patrick, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You didn't get the good half though. Scott couldn't make it.
Is he the good half?
I like to think so. He's got the better voice anyway.
Yeah, that he does. He's got that lower voice. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so what we're going to do today for those of you watching is I'm going to just kind of and we'll get to the plugs and all that stuff, all that fun stuff, but I'm just going to let Patrick kind of talk about his life as a gamer, starting a podcast. I've got some questions. I'm going to interview him. And then at the end, we're going to do something kind of fun, and we'll close out the show and let you guys all get back to your regularly scheduled lives. And so, Patrick, how long has the podcast been running? You guys are relatively new, correct?
Yes, we're quite new. We'll be coming up on a year here at the very beginning of December. So we're still sort of gaining traction and feeling things out, trying out new things and trying ideas out. But 1 year will be in next month.
So we'll get to the specifics of the show and kind of what all goes into putting it together. But first, why don't you tell me about how you got into gaming? Sort of give me your origin story. How'd you get into games?
Well, I was born in 1984 at the Washington Hospital. You don't want that far back, do you? It's Scott asked me
games. They had games there at the
Scott
hospital?
asked me this a while back, and really for me, the big history with gaming has been Magic the Gathering. I think that if I had to define my 25 or so years of gaming, 20 years of it, or just about, was all Magic all the time. I didn't want to play anything else because that's time that I could have been playing Magic. But I think that the seed was planted a long time ago. When I was like 7 or 8, my dad got us Hero Quest. And then the next Christmas, he got us Battle Master. So I feel like my dad was kind of like a nerd in disguise and planted the seed. And naturally, we played the heck out of it. Probably played it all wrong and lost all the pieces. But, from that young age, I was exposed to this hobby and really enjoyed it. That turned into Magic the Gathering when I was in middle school, and it was Magic, Magic, Magic. I went to every Pro Tour qualifier I could, every Grand Prix, every Nationals qualifier. You name it, if it was Magic, I was doing it. Every Friday night was Magic. My wife rolled her ankle. We weren't married at the time, but I think I think it was broke. She was in a cast by the time all was said and done. We had just started dating. She's like, yeah, I think I rolled my ankle. Garrett's going to take me to the hospital. I was like, all right, honey, I'm in the middle of a round. I'll call you when all's done. You
Wow.
just call me and let me know if something. To this day, I regret that, but that's how magic centric gaming has been with me.
Yeah,
I hope she's probably upstairs. She can probably hear me and is.
yeah. I'm gonna get a hold of her. We're gonna stage an intervention. So two questions. First of all, what's your first memory of Magic, like when you first saw it? And second of all, are you still a player? Do you still play competitively? Where is Magic in your life? So kind of two questions there.
All right, yeah. Well, the first part is it was actually, I think I was in seventh grade at a middle school dance, and my brother and
Dance.
his friend were like chaperoning because they were older, and it was at a fire hall that had a little kitchenette, and he had this box, a starter set from Revised. It's a Kaz versus Zach, and it came with a couple of pre-constructed decks. And middle school dance, there's a lot going on for you as a participant. So you're out there checking out the girl you want to dance with, and then hanging with your buddies. And oh yeah, my brother and Mike, they're back in that kitchenette. I'm going to go check on them. And they were back there playing Magic. And I started looking through these cards, and there's this big mammoth with the tusks, and then Terror. There was a black card called Terror. It's got this skeletal, like emaciated corpse with the eye bulging out. And I was like, that's rad. That's the first memory of Magic. I just was blown away by the artwork, by the theme of it. And I kind of wanted to get lost in that world.
Right.
I don't remember the second half of your question, though.
What about today? Do you still play? Are you competitive today?
No, I'm not. There was a while where I would call myself semi-competitive. My big, I mean, I made several PTQ top eights, which is a qualifier to go pro. And you have a room of say 200 people, and the top eight will do a draft or something. You get a little pin, and I think over the years I collected a dozen of those pins for making the top eight. Never actually qualified. Never actually got to go pro.
Wow.
Several friends that have though, and good for them, but I could never get over that hump. There was nationals one year, the qualifier to go to nationals. I was 9-1. It was when Affinity, a certain archetype, was really good. I was 9-1 going into the last round. My friends were like, dude, you did it. Congrats. All you got to do is sit down, shake hands, take the intentional draw, and you're in. There were, I think, 7 9-1s. And then there was like an 8-0-1, like some guys that if they sat down, they have to play, they have to win. So I got paired against a guy named James, who was one of the pair downs that he actually had to play, and he actually had to win. And it went to game 3, and he got me. And I finished 9-1-1. I think I was like 10th place. You needed to make top 8 out, and it was a field of probably 1,000 players. And
That's cool.
so dejected. But you know what? I have a 6-year-old now, and when she was born, I would still play a lot of Magic the Gathering online. They have a pretty robust community and tournament system through Moto. I would do that anytime I had the opportunity to, but Magic's a lifestyle game. It's not a game that you can sit down, play it once a month, and still be competitive. I mean, if it's around the kitchen table with your buddies, sure, play as you wish. But if you want to actually be competitive, which is where I found the enjoyment of it, I wasn't showing up. To me, the fun was showing up and winning, not showing up and getting to try out something different or some goofy combo. And for those that's your thing, great. For me, I wanted to win. So it more became a grind of I'm playing on Moto so that I can keep my skills sharp, so that the next PTQ I'll be competitive. And the problem is I wasn't able to go to any of the Pro Tour qualifiers. My wife travels for work. We have a little girl. I work, and it's like, well, why bother? I'm not making money doing this. It's fun, but it can be lonely too. So am I competitive now? No, I'm not. And frankly, I haven't bought anything Magic the Gathering for about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I'm a very capital C casual player. I probably play Magic maybe once a year, super casual. And so I'm not a huge fan of Magic. But what do you think about games that are basically just, because Magic started something really new with what you could do with cards, at least as far as what I know about the history of games. But since, was it 1994, 95, about that time when it was created?
Just about
that time. Since then, we've had there's been so many games that replicate a lot of that structure. Competitive
Mhm.
games. Now they've gone into cooperative games such as like Arkham Horror and the Lord of the Rings, like the LCGs. What do you think
Yes.
about those? Do you play any of those? Play anything like a Netrunner or anything like that?
I have never played an LCG. I was joking with Scott in the last episode. I got
Wow.
Arkham Horror, the card game. It's like, well, I'll give this one a try. He keeps hyping up these LCGs, and Arkham Horror is really popular. So I
Hmm.
found it at Barnes and Noble for $10. Bought 2 copies, passed one along. The other one I held on to. I was like,
Nice.
well, for $10, I mean, if it's not my cup of tea, no big deal. My wife was just on the road for 3 weeks. So I got it out of the storage unit. I was like, I'm gonna take the plastic off of this thing, learn it. I'll have every night to myself. And it's still on my shelf in plastic. I haven't had the time to crack it
Oh,
open
okay.
and really learn the rules and dive into it. So as far as how a CCG collectible card game like Magic relates to a we'll call it a living card game such as
Right.
Arkham Horror or Marvel Champions, I
Yeah.
understand the differences. One's more of a closed system where you know what you're getting in packaging, whereas collectible card game at this point I think is a little bit deceiving because if you're playing competitively, you're not collecting the cards. You have them all anyway, or you have the ones that you want anyway, and the ones that you don't, you just go buy them individually.
Yeah.
Um,
Exactly.
so in a roundabout way, it's kind of living in that when a set comes out, well, you don't need to buy 4 copies of every card, but if you intend on playing a certain deck, you're going to get them anyway.
Hmm.
There's just that little like that gambling aspect of going and buying a pack, and maybe I get a foil
That's
Jace or something that's worth $50 out of this, which honestly I kind of like.
that's okay. So is that something that kind of turned you off to the LCG structure? The fact that there's no longer the chase. Is that what, right? They call it the chase.
Well, I guess if I had to pick between the two, if I was getting into one now, I think I would
Yeah.
actually prefer the LCG structure because you know what you're going to get. And it being a closed system and not having rotating formats like something like Magic does if you're playing standard, I think that once you know what you want to play, once you get good at the style of play that you want to have, and with Magic, it's constantly shifting. I like the idea that I don't have to keep updating myself. What's the new tech? What's the new sideboard strategy for when you go against that deck? Um, Magic, as far as like the surprise of what you're going to get, to me, the best way to play was always limited, not build your deck and play. Because for 30 years, nobody's built their own deck, and 25 years, nobody's built their own deck and played. You build a deck that you find online. And that's what you play with. You learn how to pilot
Oh,
it. Magic even got to the point where they would allow a note card where you could jot down notes that, so I get online, I watch a video on how to play this deck, and I watch this guy play it through a tournament and talk all about it. And when you're going up against blue green, you need to sideboard in these cards, and here's why. They even got to the point where they would let you take in a note card, like a cheat
wow.
sheet for, okay, when I'm going against this deck, what do I sideboard? So you're not actually playing against their own creation. Whereas I think maybe an LCG would give the opportunity to do that a little bit more. Draft in Magic, though, you show up, you open a pack, take a card, and pass it. It's a limited
Right.
format. You're limited as far as what you're going to have access to. Some of the old sealed tournaments, you'd get 6 packs, open them up, and you have to build a deck of 40. Yeah, there's going to be some differences. I might open up some planeswalkers and really powerful cards and be able to just run the tournament because of what I opened. But I always look at it like if you're the worst player in the room and you open up the best cards in the room, you're not going to win. If you're the best player in the room and you open up a decent pool, it's not great, but it's decent, you can win. And I always love that about limited.
Hmm. Cool. So then how did you get into like board games? What's your first memory of kind of transforming over to being more of a board gamer?
Well, when you play Magic, you're in these hobby shops all the time. So you
Sure.
see board games on the shelves. It's always interesting. A big one for me was Axis and Allies. I had a friend that I was over at his house. His brother was in college, and he showed a bunch of 10-year-olds how to play Axis and Allies. Uh, promptly lost, first of all.
Yeah,
He played
10.
like a college player against a bunch of 10-year-olds, but I really really loved it. Every single piece was a different type of miniature, and they all had their own stats, their own attack powers. And oh, you need transporters to go across the sea. For a 10-year-old, it felt like I am playing the most complicated game ever created. And promptly bought a copy, and that became like an every month thing or so. Like I'd have my friend Mike over to, yeah, let's play some Axis and Allies. Even whenever I was in college, and this was whenever I was very competitive with Magic and spending a lot of time with Magic, we'd make it an issue to, like, on the weekend, I'm going to come back home. We're going to throw down at Axis and Allies, and then we're going to play. The other one was Settlers of Catan. After a while, you start playing Magic in these shops. You see games and other people playing board games. Catan, of course, was a big one in the mid and late 90s. And naturally, I tried it, loved it, and that became our game. So Axis and Allies and Catan, that was it. That was our board game landscape for me outside of Magic for 15 years, mid 90s till, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, Axis and Allies, that's a game you can really play that like all weekend.
Yeah, you can go long. We've actually gotten to the point where, like, we've played it enough where you can kind of read the tea leaves and say, okay, we've been in this scenario before. I know what happens. I know I lost Corellia, so it's inevitable. I'll concede. Like, we got really good at playing for 3 hours and conceding. And it's never like well, you could work your way out of this. No, it typically, when one of us would concede, it made perfect sense. So we could hammer out a couple games in a weekend.
I used to play a lot of Risk with a buddy of mine named Adam. Shout out to Adam. But he's one of those guys that's never concedes. He's like, I want to roll this out to the end. And it's like, dude, if you ever played Risk and it comes down to, I have player elimination, you get down to the last two people. It's like, I own this half of the board. If you're lucky, you own the other half of the board, maybe, or vice versa. And it's just like, once I get you down or you get me down or something, but specifically for Adam, he would always just like, I want to roll it out all the way to the bitter end. It's like,
inevitability be damned.
Do you want to spend the next hour like just rolling and me moving guys, troops, and rolling and moving troops? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Why would I play to win? I'm trying to play to win. I'm like, but you're not going to win. And he's like, well, I don't know that unless if we actually come to a conclusion. If I just say, no, let's just pack it up because, and so he's very kind of hard determinism in that aspect. So I've played a lot of Risk, which is kind of, thanks, Adam. Thanks. He's kind of soured Risk for me. I don't know if he'll ever watch this, but so let's get into talking about podcasting. And so what made you start a podcast? Where did that come from? We're going to start a podcast. Give me the story question on that.
I listen to a bunch of podcasts. One of my favorites being The Secret Cabal. And, I work on houses. I've was work before before you messaged me to start doing this day. I was over putting a floor down, a laminate, one of those piece together floors at a rental. Oftentimes whenever I'm working, I'll have a podcast on just for some background noise, music sometimes, but the stuff I like, I've heard a billion times. So I'd rather hear voices. It feels like company, keeping me company while I'm working.
Okay.
So I'm listening to all these shows as I'm working on houses and whatnot. And I thought, what, I've played a lot of games. Sometimes I hear other shows and they're talking about some of the stuff that they've been playing or their history in gaming. And I think, well, I've played more games than this guy. Or they'll talk about a game and they'll say anything, X, Y, and Z. And I think, oh, no, of course you didn't like it because you went that. No, that's not how you play that. You're supposed to be. I didn't like Cosmic Encounter because it's very random and some of the races are overpowered. Well, yes, of course, some of the races are overpowered. They're supposed to be that way. The table has to bounce. So like I'm shouting back at my phone that's playing a podcast. I'm like, you know what? I could do this. And then my wife started taking work, which has her on the road and traveling. And at the time, our little one was 3. And I had the opportunity to stay at home. She said, stay home from work, quit your job. I'm going to do this. And, and suddenly I have all this time on my hands. I thought, what, maybe I could actually do this. And you have it in mind that, like, to get started, what do I need? A microphone and some time. I've got to spend a lot of time figuring out how to do it right. And fortunately I had that. I scraped together some money for a microphone, and the rest, I don't want to say the rest is history because it's not that easy, but that sort of was the transition, was enjoying other shows and interacting with these people that can't hear me talk back to the radio, and thinking, I'd really like to do this.
Do you work with any employees? Do you work alone?
Oh, no, I work alone.
Oh, okay.
For that,
I was wondering if the people you work with, you're shouting at their like podcast.
Oh no, they would they'd have to wonder about me. No, a lot of the work on the first house was done with my father-in-law, and the second house, a lot of it was alone, but a lot of it was also with my father-in-law. He had some health issues that were keeping him from being able to come as often as he did on house number one. He has since passed, and now I'm on house number three, and it's literally just me over there
Okay.
all the time. Or like, you have a road trip, long car ride. I got to go pick something up at the airport. Hour to kill. Well, turn on a podcast. So I hear what they have to see. What games are they talking about today?
Oh, sorry to hear about your loss. You actually talked about, you just kind of briefly mentioned something that was my next question. And
Sure.
so my next question is, what are the challenges that you face or faced getting a podcast started?
Oh, all right. So we're the Level Up board game podcast. And the reason why we went with the Level Up, I'm going to make this into a long story.
Okay, go
Initially, like
ahead.
right now, it's Scott and I. And initially, that wasn't the plan. It was a group of guys that I used to work with. They make up a gaming group that I reference on the show, the Lobsters. We all worked at a certain seafood restaurant, so they're now affectionately called the Lobsters. They'll come over typically once a month, or I'll go to their place and we'll all play some board games. And when I started toiling around with this idea, I thought, they play games with me. They're not like gamers. They'll play video games and all sorts of these hobby adjacent things, but they'll play board games because I'm bringing them, and they enjoy them. They love them, but they're not going out and
Mhm.
buying. A couple of them have bought a game here and there, but they're not like, holy crap, I'm diving in headfirst into this hobby. It was more them indulging me. So I thought, level up. This would be the concept. Here we have these new gamers. They're new to the hobby. One thing that seemingly every podcast has in common is you have somebody, typically some guy in his 50s or late 40s, that's been gaming for 30 years, and they know everything about every game, and they're referencing all these other. And I thought, man, that's really hard for someone new to the hobby. Like if I'm just starting to get into board gaming, I'm like, well, oh, there's podcasts about this. Maybe I'll download one. Sometimes you're just going to be lost in the weeds with some of the terminology, some of the more experienced folks. Sometimes their episodes are literally every episode is, here's what's brand new this week. Here's also what's brand new this week. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. There's a backlog of 20 years, 30 years of games that I've never heard of. And your reference, what's in it for them? And I thought, well, the Lobsters haven't played that long. They haven't, they don't have the same history with board games that I do. So we're gonna, like, I had it in mind, we're gonna be at like level 0 as a show, and each of our people on this show, we're gonna be a level 0 character, almost like a D&D campaign. And like,
Right.
Jeremy won the game of Twilight Imperium. You know what, Jeremy? You just leveled up. Jeremy's at level 1. I had all these things like I'm brainstorming, okay, how maybe we do like some kind of tracking, like what level are we all at, or is it going to be the show by itself? But the concept was, here we have inexperienced gamers talking about games, very raw first impressions. Somebody wants to talk about Unfathomable, the new Fantasy Flight release that's based on Battlestar Galactica. Inevitably,
Right.
they're going to draw correlations to Battlestar Galactica. Well, if I got into the hobby last year, I've never played Battlestar Galactica. Or if I got into it
Right.
a month ago, maybe I didn't know that it was a board game. And then they're going to say, well, there's definitely social deduction, such as XYZ game. And I'm going, well, I've never heard of that one either. Just tell me about Unfathomable, would you? So that was our premise. And then we thought we're going to invite people in to give their input. Long story short, and coming full circle to your initial question, some of the hurdles that we ran into was, okay, we have 4 different people that are going to be recording. We have to do this in my basement. We need to soundproof. So I went to Harbor Freight
Yeah.
and bought a whole bunch of furniture pads. There's hooks all over my ceiling. I put grommets in the furniture pads. Now I have these things hanging around my basement, around this big table, and all 4 of us there, each with like a microphone, and we record and everything's sounding great. It's like, this is going to work. And then I listened to, like, I had to synchronize the tracks. I import Jeremy's track, my track, etc. And it sounded echoey. And what was happening was when I would talk into my microphone, my voice is really close. But Jeremy's microphone on the other side of the table would also kind of pick up my voice a
Yeah, of
split
course.
second later. So would Adam's, and so would Ryan's. And anytime they would talk, it would do the same thing. So we had like a wah wah, like almost like an echoey sound. And God help anyone whenever we laughed, because it just sounded like a train wreck. So that, getting over the hurdle of how to actually make the sound work. What's an omnidirectional microphone? There's so much reading involved in trying to figure out how to, never mind the software, how to work with something like Audacity to make your sound actually crisp and clean. What am I doing to the room? How am I actually going to get all these voices into one feed? That was, that was hands down the trickiest part. And as it turns out, to conclude the lobster story, and eventually, I told them, guys, I just don't think I can make it work with 4. So I got in touch with Scott. I got a microphone that could pick up 2 people, and we'll oftentimes record together. And sometimes we'll do it just like we're doing right now, where we'll both get on the computer, we'll do a Google Meet and just chit chat back and forth, and it works out beautifully.
It seems like the two big things for podcasts, and I guess for YouTube channels, if you're doing video, is one is the theme, as far as what is my show going to be. As far as the podcast, are we going to do interviews? Are we going to do reviews? Are we going to do a mishmash of a little bit of everything? And then the second half would be the technical aspect. Like you said, yes. Omnidirectional microphones, software, figuring out what plugs into what.
Yeah, I still don't know what half of that stuff means.
Do I have a computer that I can, use? And how do we get this edited in some, at least an efficient manner, so that I'm not spending my entire weekend editing just one episode?
Right.
Because you got to be efficient. They say content is king. So you got to keep that, content coming out. If you get sidetracked, if you get kind of busy, or if you don't have a really streamlined process, people are going to fall out. You take some people, and I'll talk about YouTube because I'm in the YouTube community, I suppose. They start school or they have a kid, and so they've dropped off, kind of dropped out of there, taking a break from their channel. Well, I've kind of lost some of those. There's one that I listen to that has nothing to do with board games, so I'm not even really going to talk much about it, but that guy, he's from Canada, and he had some things going on, and he hasn't been around on YouTube in, I don't even know, 4, 5, 6 months. And so everyone just kind of drops out. So,
and when he comes back, they might not even realize it. He's lost a bunch of his base.
Yeah, I probably won't even really know. So yeah, they say content is king. So you have to really figure out, first of all, A, what's the show going to be? What's it going to sound like? And B, like, what do we need? How do we work this equipment? Do we know someone that can help us figure out this equipment? Help us or help me if it's like me, which just me. I just said me a lot there.
You're getting paid per me.
Yeah, I just made $3 for me. 4.
There you go.
For me. Yeah. And so, was that a difficult process? Did you sit down with, now I know you said that you had this lobster group, but then when did you figure out what the show was going to be? Were we going to do reviews? Tell me about that process.
It's really, really tricky. The first thing is, you cannot search like, how do I promote my board game podcast? What's my board game podcast going to be about? Because it's such a niche. You're going to get things that are all about like, healthy living podcasts and how to make your health. Like, you're going to get much more general, broad audience appeal suggestions for topics that you have no intention of getting into. You just want very specific information. And where you can find it, where there are some little nuggets of information, like your Board Game Geek, for example, you're going to get some very consistent advice. And one of the most consistent is, you have to find a way to differentiate yourself, because if you're going to offer a review and what I've been playing lately and a discussion, congratulations, you are one of 1,000, and you are the smallest one because you're brand new. Good luck. And there are some of these guys that that have a podcast. They also seem to have their face on every single blockbuster Kickstarter. They've already got their connections. When a big game's coming out, they don't have to ask for it. It's provided to them. Now, me as a listener, I'm not going to listen to the guys that are trying to come up with something to be competitive. No, I want to listen to the guy that's going to tell me about Unfathomable that just came out, or I want to hear about Iridia while it's on Kickstarter. So that makes it very difficult to compete with them. As far as theming goes, I'll tell you a little bit about what we did, because we do kind of fit that mold of, well, we're not that different from everybody else. Well, we're far more handsome. I thought, okay, what do we have that other people don't? And awkwardly with the Lobster Group, the answer was inexperience. And I thought, well, maybe we can play off of that.
Hmm.
Here's a fresh take. The first game I ever played was insert something that's not traditionally somebody's first game. How did you feel? I tried this and I haven't played Battlestar Galactica before. What did I think about Unfathomable? In our example. So I thought, okay, we have that. And this is going to sound ridiculous. I was looking for music. You can find free music and free sounds online, which becomes very important with a podcast. You can't use like the Star Wars theme as your intro to your podcast. There's well, you can use 5 seconds of it or something. Well, that's not what I want. So I was trying to find like an RPG theme because we're going to be leveling up. And I found this guy that makes like 8-bit Nintendo music basically. So like our
Mm-hmm.
intro is a really cool theme. I'm really proud of it. Well, I'm proud I found it, but he should be proud of it. It's a phenomenal little theme. And he makes music and whatnot for video games. There's apparently a robust community of people that's what they do is they make 8-bit games, and this is one of the people that will provide music for it. And his only thing is just credit me, if you use my music, it's free.
Okay.
So I downloaded all those files and I thought, okay, well, we're leveling up, and RPGs are kind of board game adjacent and in the same nerd stratosphere with board games.
Yeah,
So we're leveling
tabletop.
up. We have this RPG theme going on. Now we have like an 8-bit Nintendo thing that's also board game adjacent. So it's kind of honestly like our theme was a mishmash of finding the music that I really liked and having this concept of leveling up. Now Scott came on and he's been playing board games longer than I have. So that kind of had us abandoning we're going to take the we've never played this before approach. And it did become a bit more traditional in that sense. Our show tends to be more, like I said, along that structure of, well, we say what we've played, and here's our review game, and here's our discussion. But we do a couple things that I think are a little differentiated. One is we invite listeners to submit their audio. I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a place where, like, I'm working on a house and I'm listening to a podcast and somebody's describing a game and I'm thinking, oh, I could have described that better. Man, he missed some of these bullet points that I would have gone over. Wouldn't it be cool if somebody listening to Scott and I, they hear us talk about Biblios and they say, oh, they really didn't emphasize the second portion of the game. I could have done that better. Wouldn't it be cool if they could submit their audio and we could hear Joe in Arizona or Landon in London? Yeah, it's very good.
Alliteration.
And they, bless you. They could then
Bryce
talk
from
about
Birmingham, right?
they could submit their thoughts on a game that they've been playing, and that had a couple of benefits. One, it would make the show be more community based. It's sort of an everyman's show. Anybody can say what I've been playing, what did I think about it. Anybody can respond to one of our reviews. Hey, we wanted to play what Sandy had to say about our last review, and hi, this is Sandy from Albuquerque. I listen to your review, et cetera, et cetera. I thought that'd be really cool to get some community input. So we really wanted to work with that. And that's turned into the Academy segment. You'll recall you submitted audio and I was like, dude,
I did.
you're good at this. You should be doing this more regularly. I didn't know about As For My Ability at the time or your YouTube channel. So I was very pleased that you signed on. We have someone else who contributed a few times. And I thought, you know what, he came to me with the idea is like, I wouldn't mind doing a segment, about games that are, either this or this. And we went with games that are outside of the top 1,000. What that's doing is that's actually easing some of the burden on Scott and I. Believe it or not, we don't spend all day, every day playing board games. I get to see him once or twice a week. And if he's sick or if my daughter has dance, I might see him for 2 hours. That's not enough to review a game. So we have to do a lot online and whatnot. This is a way that we can get more games talked about on the show without us having to sit down and actively play 10 games a week, 11 games a week. And I'm at a point now I'm baffled. There, like I said, some of the folks that their face seems to be on every Kickstarter. I'm thinking, there is no way this guy played this game, and this game thoroughly and still played all those games he talked about on his show this week, all this week. I don't know, maybe they are. I don't get it, but kudos to them. I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, maybe that's their job. Do you think any of these people like have this as their job? I know like there's the Dice Tower and Tom Basil, and they that's their job. But what about board game podcasts? You think any of them? This is what we do. This is our job.
Yeah, there are a couple, and for example, I'll say Secret Cabal. They have several hosts, but you can tell their editor, their main host, is a gentleman named Jamie Kagi. He's really enthusiastic. Their show's captivating. I am a listener, and I really love it. They do a Kickstarter every year, and part of their funding is, this portion will be my salary so that I can continue to edit the show and put out quality content. More content, video content on top of it. So he, for example, is doing it for a living. Some of these guys, they'll start up like a Patreon account. Hey guys, chip me $1 every episode, $2 an episode. And sometimes they'll even do something like, if you give $5 an episode, every year you'll get our new pint glass or our new beer mug, whatever they're giving away for their Patreon supporters. And, I have nothing against that. They get some kickback for their efforts, and the listeners get their beer glass, their beer mug, and not at a terrible price typically. So there are people that have found a way to monetize doing a podcast, but I can't recommend anyone get into it with the hopes of monetizing a podcast. The ones that are monetized have all been around for 8 or 10 years. So I'm guessing if Scott and I were to ever even approach that bridge, let alone cross it, it would be 3, 4, 5 years from now. So it's really not even in our minds. And for your listeners, for those watching this, that's not why you get into it. Even if that's why you get into it, and you've accepted that it's going to take 4 or 5 years to get to that point, there's so much work involved. There is so much work involved. And if you don't put the work that is required to produce a quality show, well, you're never going to have the listener base that's going to support your efforts at monetization 4 or 5 years from now. You'll still be just a middling show. You really have to put in just an absurd amount of time.
Well, you and I have both already talked outside of this that we both are teachers, and so maybe there's something intrinsic about that, because they say don't get into teaching for the money, right? Everyone's kind of heard that. You're not going to make a whole lot of money working in education for the most part, at least on the bottom rails as far as teaching. And so maybe there's just something about personality type that doesn't
we like to hear ourselves talk. That's for certain. I haven't met a teacher that was quiet. Every teacher I know, sometimes myself included, needs to learn how to zip it from time to time. Part of the job. You like being in front of people. You like, let me ask you this. When you have a new game or the group wants to learn a game, your gamer buddies, who's the one that teaches it?
I do.
Bingo. You know who teaches my group? Me. And it's not because I want to read a rule book. It's because I want to be the one that's teaching it. There's almost like a selfishness. Like I want to be the center of attention. And
I got to tell your little thing apart here, though, because for me, it's because I ordered the game. I've had some time to sit with the game, maybe set it up, play out a turn, read the rule books, watch some videos of like how to play videos and stuff. So that's why I end up teaching it. Not because I'm necessarily the better teacher, although I probably am, but it's just because it's my game. I ordered it in the mail, or I picked it up at a FLGS, and I've had more time to sit, for a week and kind of go, okay, by the time we get together, I'm going to have a pretty good foundation in as far as how this game goes. Why don't I teach it? Because, it's a new game. If it's not a new game, you don't really need a whole lot of instruction, unless if you have that one player that's like, okay, we've all played this game before except for Sally. And so someone's got to kind of explain it to her. Well, usually that just kind of falls back on me. I don't know if that's necessarily a narcissistic sort of thing. I'm not sure about that, but for me, and yeah, I guess I am a teacher, but for me, I don't know if it would be it's just the fact that I have a show on YouTube. You guys are all watching it now. I play a lot of games. I teach a lot of games. I review a lot of games. It's just part of this cycle, just you do. I know you do reviews on the Level Up Board Game Podcast. So in order to review them, you got to play them, you got to find them, you got to get them in the mail, or have maybe
And
a
typically,
company
if you're going
send
to be
you.
reviewing it, you got to teach it, because if you want to know that game inside and out, you got to
Mhm.
be the one that goes through what is frankly a burdensome process of having to flip through sometimes a very large rule book and then watch some how-to videos, set it up on your table. You ever do
Yep.
this where you play a
Yeah.
dummy player against yourself? That's that's
I've
not
done that.
fun for me. It's more for the fun that I'll get out of when I have other people at the table. When I'm
Mhm.
sitting alone in my basement when my daughter's asleep, it's not fun to play Blitzkrieg against myself, but I'll do it because I want to be able to teach the game inside and out. When I do finally sit down, it makes that experience that much better. And I don't hate that experience, having to go through that process of learning the game to make sure that everything goes smoothly. Maybe that's a better way to summarize the teacher in me. I don't hate that process because it's worth it in the end.
Right. So you've talked about my next question. We've really kind of talked about, but maybe you can expand on it. The next question is, what are some of your influences? What podcasts kind of influenced how you do your podcast or how you put it together? You mentioned the Secret Cabal. Are there any others? Just briefly talk about what shows you listen to, what ones kind of influenced what the Level Up guys are doing.
Hands down, like way out in front is Secret Cabal. And
Okay.
then
Yep, we've talked
just go
about them.
way back to, like, way down the line to hit second place, third place. Not that I'm ranking these, they're just that much more influential to me.
Mhm.
Of course, Dice Tower. Anybody that is making a podcast or listens to them, that's typically landing spot number one. What's this
Right.
Dice Tower? I used to listen to it while I was working in security and fraud in a bank, which sounds a lot cooler than it is. But I'd
It
have
does sound
the
pretty
little
cool.
earpiece in. You just stare at checks all day. You'd have the
It,
earpiece in, and I'd be listening to Tom Vassell while I'm, just verifying check. This look
is
good, click.
is part of the training program watching Catch Me If You Can.
You're the second person that brought that up.
Just
That's
today?
no,
Oh
but
no, in general.
I don't tell many people about when
I
I was
love
working in security and
I
fraud.
love that movie.
And last person I explained it to is like, wait a minute, did you ever see Catch Me If I Can? And coincidentally, no, I have not.
You
I know
haven't
it's on
seen
my
it?
list. It's on my list. I'll get
Oh
to watching
man.
it.
It's probably like a top 10 for me, movie wise. I watch it like
Dice
every year.
So Dice Tower, of course, it was a big influence, and then
Okay.
beyond that, you'd listen to, like, I liked Blue Peg, Pink Peg, and Board Game Revolution. Now I'm really big on Space Cat's Peace Turtles, which is a board game podcast that
Sounds
is specific to Twilight Imperium 4th edition, and it's unique compared to others because it's a very very niche show. They're talking competitive quality Twilight Imperium play, which is a thing. You're not going to get that listening to the Secret Cabal or Blue Peg, Pink Peg. They need to hit a lot of buttons, every episode. They've got to appeal to a wider audience. This is laser focused. You gather what you can. I'm not going to say that every influence from the shows that I listened to was always a good thing. Oftentimes you're listening and going, oh, I don't want to do that. Man, why are
yeah,
they putting
okay.
a rating system on this game? Their rating system means nothing to me. Tell me about the game. Why are they teaching me the rules? Anybody can teach the rules of the game and then say, I liked it. No, go over the rules briefly. Absolutely
Yeah.
go over the rules. That'll give me some flavor, but you don't need to teach me what happens if I take Gibraltar with a submarine and a transport as opposed to a battleship. It doesn't matter. Give me the theme of the game. Give me how am I going to feel when I'm playing this? Is it tense? Does it have me on the edge of my seat?
Sure.
Is it
That's good.
thinky? Do I have to be sit and calculate like a game like Brass, or is it confrontational like Twilight Imperium, for example? Is it going to be negotiating and trading and bartering with each other and being like the hands rubbing together, a sneaky car salesman type of game where you gotta play up that role? I think in listening to other shows, not only do you get positive influences with, I'm going to borrow that, or man, I really like the way that they do this, you can also find things that you don't want to do. And in many instances, that's, a lot of our shows. We try to take what we've learned from the ones that we listen to and say, okay, we really like this, we don't like this. And that sort of helped us come up with a better format and better discussions around the games that we talk about.
I've noticed that when it comes to just audio, not video, but just a podcast, it's just audio. If you
Mhm.
start to get into reviewing a game and then diving into, like you said, of like, here's how the game works, here's all the specific details of all the pieces and how they interact with each other. Well, just over the audio without really seeing, the components, which you can do in video, which Rodney Smith does great work with, how to play games and stuff. But
Mhm.
just over the audio, I feel that that's kind of a disservice to me, because I have no clue. I haven't even
None of it
bought the game.
sticks.
I don't even know what the components they're talking about, or how they start getting into strategies and all that stuff. And for me, when I was putting my channel together, I had to go through the same thing that you went of just like, what is my show going to be? And I kind of wanted it to
Mhm.
be an amalgamation of quite a few different things that originally started as just kind of focusing on games that have really heavy theme and narrative. But that's not for this recording right now. But I realized that I don't want to do a how to play video. There's people that can do that, but
Right.
I want to do exactly what you do or are doing. And this is way before, because we were relatively new as far as knowing each other. I've been doing this since 2019. And so what I wanted to do is exactly what you do, is just like, give me a feel of the game. I try to expose my audience to a lot of games that they probably have never heard about. I'm not a cult of the new sort of person, at least on my channel. I don't always hit. I mean, the last couple of things I talked about what I've been playing, only one game was actually relevant. All the other games were
Mm.
like 10 years old. Star Wars, the LCG, that's like 10 years old. The role playing game, the FFG role playing game, that came out in 2015. But I want to talk about these things because, as you said, not everyone is going to be that 50-year-old guy that's just, is like, this is boring, give me the new stuff. But I can jump back 5 years, 10 years, and say, here's a game that I found that you, if you're new, probably should check out, or not. Let me give you a sense of the game. And
Mhm.
from what I'm hearing, that's exactly, we kind of operate on the same level, as far as, not really, I don't really try to, and my friends give me some crap about this, I don't really sit down with the intent of like, this is my board game review, I'm going to review this game. Sometimes it slips in, sometimes I say like, I
Mhm.
really like this, or it's okay. What I try to do is, what is this game and who's it for? That's kind of my template, I suppose. So what is the game and who is it for? And that's where I think that, especially audio, and obviously I work more in video, but in audio, I think that works really well. I think it works really well on your show. And so we both kind of have the same approach. It's kind of interesting. I have a couple more questions. Oh, go ahead. You
Yeah,
want to comment?
absolutely. Well, I was going to say, I think there's a lot more value to saying, not only was it fun for me, but who's this game for? Because there are a lot of games that are a lot of fun for a lot of people that I don't like. And it's not doing it much justice if I just say, yeah, no, this game's, it's not for me. I didn't like it. Well, that doesn't tell anybody anything if they're listening to us for the first time. If they stuck through 30 episodes, well, then they kind of have the gist of what Pat likes. And if Pat says, yeah, he didn't like it, I'm probably not going to like it either. But if we can
Mm,
also throw in, well, who's it for? This might be your first
yeah.
episode. And I don't care much for tactical miniatures on a board, a game like Wildlands. You get 5 little pieces running around and collecting diamonds. It's not my cup of tea, but you will like it if you enjoyed this game. It has similarities to that game. And if those were appealing to you, I think you're going to like this game. That gives a lot more to a listener than just finding out if somebody liked it or not. So I think you're on to something there with that approach as well, where, you know, every game, what do they say? Every pot has a lid. Every game has people that are going to like it. I don't know. My dad used to say every seat has an ass. I don't but the point
Okay.
is, whenever we review a game, part of our goal is to try and identify who's the audience for this game. So we did a game that was remarkably simple to the extent that one of the mechanics in it was like a duck, duck, goose mechanic going around the table. Now we would not have taken on this game from this publisher had we known that it was that simple. but we still did it. We still had a good time doing it. And
Mhm.
we were upfront about it. Would I want to play this again? No. If I saw it at a convention, would I sit down and play? No. But if my kids wanted to play a game at a family reunion, Dad, get in on this, I would have a darn good time, or I'd be okay with showing them that. You can identify who the audience is for it. And that I think provides a lot of value, not only to your listeners, but frankly to the publisher too.
Yeah, you can always, because when you listen to podcasts, you don't normally know the person close per se.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say 99% of the time you don't. So for them to just say like, this is good, this is bad, seal of approval or whatever terminology they want to use for their show doesn't mean a whole lot, unless if you can say, I recently did a rather explosive video about a game called Icarus. Now, Icarus is a cooperative storytelling game, very akin to, it's actually made by the same people that made Alice is Missing. And so it's kind of a role playing where we're all contributing to the story, very untold adventures await kind of thing. Absolutely just did not work for me. And I had a pretty big explosive review about it. I shouldn't say review, I should just say like talking about the game. But then I had to kind of calm myself down, go back and reshoot some stuff and say, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Who is this game for? And a lot of the times, because and I don't know your gaming position within where you live, your community, but I have a gaming group that I have in the community, and yes, it's open to the public. So a lot of times we get families, we get like single dads or single moms, or just families in general that show up with younger kids. And so I don't shy away from some kids games, or from games that are incredibly simple, like a villainous sort of game. It's like your family loves Disney, you're gonna love playing Villainous with your kids because it's simple, or all the different iterations of code names and Munchkin, yada yada yada. Go all the way down the line. So I try to keep this for like, is this for really heavy on strategy, or if it's something for families? So kudos to you for kind of doing the same thing, or I guess we both have the same approach. Another question I wanted
Great
to ask,
minds think alike.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. I have no witty response for that one. So what the next question I have is like, what advice would you give to someone listening right now that wants to start a podcast? And not necessarily, you don't have to relegate it to just board game podcasts, but just, I'm sitting at home, I'm watching As Per My Ability, there's this Patrick guy on. What are some tips and tricks and some advice that you would give to someone that wants to start up a podcast about anything really, or board games?
I guess number one would be, probably regardless of what your topic is, you're not the only one out there, and there are hundreds out there. We are in an incredibly niche hobby, tabletop board games. That sounds to me like something that there should be 3 podcasts for. There are hundreds. If you search on BGG for podcasts groups, just the ones that are listed on there, there's probably 100 per page. And I can't believe there's more than one page. There are many pages. Not all of them are still currently active. The point is, though, don't try and emulate another show. You can to an extent, but don't get on there and be like, I'm going to be the next Tom Bassel. No, be the next you, and be the best you that you can be. You know what I mean? Don't try and swing someone else's bat. Refine yourself. Highlight what your strengths are. And I think that comes through on a podcast. You don't come off as fake, or like you're trying to do something that you're not necessarily well versed in. Number 2 for podcast, sound is king. Sound is king. I have spent 2 hours recording an episode and had to just go back and do the whole thing over again. If it doesn't sound perfect, it's no good. We're very fortunate in that we got a lot of responses to a poll that we put up on Board Game Geek about what are you looking for in a board game podcast? Because we're constantly trying to improve ourselves. And we did this probably around episode 15. What do you guys want? And I did select all that apply. I look for this in a board game podcast. And some of them were very near the top, like quality sound. And then the next one was, what do you not look for in a board, or what turns you off when you're listening to a podcast? And, rude hosts or I just think of any sort of like, well, that could be seen as a downside. Only new games, only old games, whatever it might. So just click whatever you want. And sound was number one for what people require when they're listening. And I can't hear fuzz. I don't want to hear airplanes in the background or your dog barking. It has to be crystal clear. So you have to take the time. It is an investment in time to find out what equipment's going to work best. And then once you get it, how to set it up, how to configure it, what software to use. And then once you have that software, you got to watch hours of YouTube tips and tricks videos. They're fantastic. There's so many out there, and they're all good. How do I get rid of that background noise? If I say something and I finish it with how do I get rid of that without it sounding like just an abrupt break? Oh, you have to click and do a fade out. Like, there are ways. It just takes a long time to learn. So number 2, absolutely get good at sound if you want to get into a podcast. My third big thing is, especially in this hobby, don't get into it thinking that you're going to monetize it immediately, or that you're going to have hundreds of listeners. We're just now at a point a year in where we're seeing 200 and 300 downloads per episode per week. Maybe by the end of the month, it will have had 400 downloads. But for a long time, in December, we launched December 14th of 2020. By the end of December, we had 80 downloads. And if I had a day where I saw the ticker said 3 downloads that day, I was like, we got 3. That's awesome. And then January, we went from 90 to say 180, and then up to 300 in February, up to March to April. And now finally it's like, oh, we're breaking 1,000 and 1,500 pretty consistently at the end of year 1. And we have a thought in mind of where we'd like to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now. But it is a crawl. This is not an industry. Like if you were doing muscle cars, you're probably a small fish in a big pond, but there's a lot of people that might be searching for a podcast about muscle cars. Board games are very, very specific, and people that want to actually listen to a show about it, never mind video, watching a video, that can be, there are some folks that don't listen to anything. I'll watch the video. It's like reading a book versus watching the movie. I'll watch the movie every time. I'm not going to do the book. Well, some people are like that with watching YouTube versus listening to a podcast. So it is a crawl. It's a grind. Get into it because you like doing it, because it's an extension of your hobby. Because if you weren't doing this, you'd be thinking about doing this. Right. Those are the 3 biggest tips I can get for if you want to get into podcasting, not just in board gaming, but probably in most hobby-centric universes.
And I think you would agree with something I said previously about content is king. So if you get into it, be like, this is something I'm going to dedicate my life to, or at least an aspect of my life. I mean, we can be family men, fathers, mothers, whatever, outside of that, but be something that you're going to commit to, because I have seen a few things start up and then they kind of just fall off, and like, yeah, we just don't have the interest anymore. So they disappear for 3 months and then they come back. I touched on this already earlier, and that's really, you're going to do yourself a disservice if you're really not going to get in there and be like, this, our content has got to be king. I keep using that phrase I heard somewhere, where it's like, you need to be having something like constantly in the works, constantly going up, or else people will forget about you. If you get into it and you're like, it's cool, I'm excited because I'm here with my girlfriend and a couple of my friends and we're recording a podcast, and then things just fall away and it's just like, I don't really know. And then 6 months later, it's like, hey, we should try to do that again. You're not going to go anywhere. And when I say go anywhere, I like Patrick said, not monetary wise. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you're just not going to go anywhere, because people want something that they can look forward to to check out. Like, I know Level Up Board Game Podcasts, you guys do Thursdays for your regular show and stuff. I typically do Tuesdays for my shows and stuff. So you just try to keep that kind of engine going, right? Right.
And
I
it
think
gets
you would
tricky
agree.
because it's not just content, it's quality content. Yeah, and you can't just, I played this game, and like I say, you can't just teach the rules of it. You have to dive in and provide something of value that's different from what they can get from anybody else talking about that game. I think there's this perception that, if I get into doing a board game podcast, for example, I'm going to be doing like 90% of the time I'm doing game centric stuff. It's going to be playing a board game. And then 10% of my time is going to be working on this podcast on the side. And when in reality, it's almost the reverse of that.
Yeah.
You might have it in mind that like, oh, I'm going to be doing a podcast. I'm going to be playing games all the time. No, the amount of time that you're going to have for playing games is going to go down significantly. And then there's going to be times where it's like, man, my episode needs to be up in 3 days. I still have to edit, the last half an hour. That's going to take me 3 hours worth of editing. I wouldn't mind sitting down and playing a solo game tonight, but I got to get an episode up. It can be, it's joyful, but it can be burdensome at times. And you have to be, excited about that.
Or if your podcast takes on the interview structure, then it's like, who's our guest? We got to book out ahead of time, contact
It's that
them.
much more work.
Yeah, it's like I almost need to hire an assistant or have someone that's just delineated to be like, can you email people so that we can have people to interview on on our show? I don't do interviews just all the time. This is one that I'm doing with you, and there's going to be another one going up on my channel this month or next month. But
I hope I'm better than the other one.
Well, we'll have to, I mean,
you can't even comment on that.
It's a zero-sum game, my friend. And so, I mean, I try to just mix up with a lot of different ideas, talking about games, doing some fun things as far as, some board game trivia. I actually took from the Level Up Board Game Podcast in the Never Have I Ever. I did that in a video.
I watched that video actually.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I was really happy to see that.
I saw that you guys had posted that. So it seems like a lot of this is just kind of, it's a really friendly, good-spirited, I've talked about this before, community for the most part. At least I haven't run into super massive dicks that are just like, you do your content, don't steal my content. Oh, I did a top 10 about the most thematic games, and now he's doing a top 10 about them. It's like, it's really, there's nothing new under the sun. You just try to keep it as fun as you can.
Exactly.
And come up with new ideas, doing board game trivia or finding a new way to put a spin on some kind of a conversation. So the last thing that I have that I just kind of want to talk about with you briefly before we launch into something that's going to be a little more unstructured and fun, fingers crossed, is
fun, you say.
Yeah, well, maybe. Where does the podcast, what's next for the podcast? Where do you see it? Not just a year from now, because I know you were talking about where you want to see it, maybe 2 years from now, 3 years from now. Do you have a certain expiration date, or just kind of what's next for the podcast?
Well, I set up the 1 year goals whenever we started. We had a clear picture of where we wanted to be in 3 months in terms of number of downloads, number of followers, but also like how many episodes should we be in. And conveniently, after we started, it was only a few months after that the Podbean, the hosting service, and Wix, the website service, were going to want the next year's rent. And I said to Scott, we'll see where we're at in 3 months. If we're enjoying it, if it's not burdensome to us, then I'll just let it roll over and pay for the next year. And that's going to come up again in say 5 or 6 months from now. So, we'll reevaluate that. There's no reason to believe that we're going anywhere. I know Scott's really enjoying it. We both have the benefit of Scott. Scott is an actor. I don't want to say that Scott doesn't have a job. He has a job that takes him all over the country and all over the place. But in doing so, he also will have 3 or 4 weekdays off at a time. He's going to Alabama this week. He got a part in a TV show, so he's going to go down there and do that for a while. He was just the Renaissance Festival. He plays the king on the weekend.
That's right. He's an actor. He's got some acting. That's right. I forgot about that.
And he does voice acting too, which he can do
Well,
from
you said he's
home.
got the voice. Yeah, we already
Oh,
talked about
Scott has the voice. Yes. So he has the time. And as of right now, with my wife traveling for work and needing to work from home at times, as long as I'm able to stay at home, uh, be a stay-at-home dad, and work on rental properties in a property manager, eventually the house will be done, and I won't have a house to work on. So it might kind of like I might have to get some more. We'll see. But for now, I do have that time. It's hard to put a measurable in place as far as how many people we want to see. We have 1 year under our belt, and I can use that information, but that's 1 year of a brand new show. Where should year two take us? You know what
right.
you cannot find is statistics for how many downloads does the Dice Tower get whenever they release a podcast? How many downloads does Secret Cabal get? Let's go smaller. How many does this one get? Let's go a smaller podcast than that. How many did they get? You can't tell. YouTube, you can click on a video and you can say, okay, this video's had 1,000 views or 10,000 views or whatever. Podcast, you can't do that. So it's really hard to compare. So I'm not going to message Jamie and be like, hey, how many downloads do you get whenever you post an episode? He might even tell me. I'm just not going to be that guy that does that. So you have to measure against yourself. So our big metric moving forward is, are we still having fun doing it? And this year's been a pleasure. It's been the most fun year in the hobby for me. I've gotten to play games on Tabletop Simulator and on BGA. I've met a lot of friends doing it. I didn't know you. I've never met you in person, and here we are getting
Mhm.
to interact for a day. Josh recorded an episode of Mega Pulse. It's a game that he introduced me to that's coming to Kickstarter next week. And he's like, hey, you guys should really check this out. So he's the one that got me in touch with the designer. I was like, well, Josh, you got to do the 8-bit breakdown with me because, you found the game. Let's do it. Josh is coming to PAX in Philadelphia in December. Scott and I just happen to be going to PAX. So I'm going to end up doing dinner with a guy that I've only ever met because of this. So you do build some relationships
Yep, that's
through
cool.
doing that. And as long as it continues on that trajectory, there isn't a part of me that's, well, if we don't reach 3,000 downloads per episode by year two, that's the end of our line, because we didn't get into it with the objective of making money in any capacity. You know what I mean? Like there's no, it is a hobby. And so long as it continues to be a fun, enjoyable hobby that's not too stressful or burdensome on my family or time, then I don't see any reason why we would slow down.
Do you keep a normal schedule as far as how you work on things? Like Mondays, I do this, or Saturdays, I edit. Are you a really strict kind of person? Because I'm all over the place with myself.
For a long time, I was really good at it, but then Scott had the Renaissance Festival, and a lot of it turned into, when are we going to be able to play the next review game? Like you'll notice we had Beyond the Sun, we had Viticulture, and we had Carnegie, all within a couple of months. And the reason that they were our review games is because they were on Board Game Arena. And Scott and I could play. My daughter's asleep by 9, and I can come down in the basement and play those with Scott without having to coordinate meeting up at the shop and playing, setting the game up and whatnot. So
Mhm.
I we try to record on a Monday, the Monday after an episode launches. So we had one actually launched today. Today is Thursday when you and I are recording. So 3
Yep.
days from now, 4 days from now, Scott and I will be recording. Something tells me we're not going to be recording on Monday because we
Oh,
normally meet up at the shop on Thursdays. We're not meeting up at the shop today. So we got to figure out, okay, what's our approach? What's our review game? We both played Blood Rage several times and together. It's an older game. And our most recent couple of games, Cryo and Dog Park, were new. So we want to okay, we just did one that's not even out yet. And that you can late pledge to, Dog Park. Then we just did
yeah, I
Cryo.
heard
That's a
that. I watched that,
2021 game. Fantastic little
or
game, by the way.
listened rather. I listened to you guys talking about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like it's kind of Wingspan adjacent.
Yes. Oh my goodness. You can tell that they drew
Okay.
inspiration from it. It's a very there's this type of game. I don't know how to categorize it, but we'll call it a watered down set of mechanics, very simple mechanics that put in a whole bunch of outside variables. In the case of Wingspan, the mechanic is put your cube at the end of the row and then hop it to the left over the birds, right?
Mhm.
But then we're going to throw in all these variables. Every bird card is different. End of round scoring goals are different. The birds that you play might have triggers that happen on your turn or when it's not your turn.
Right.
And in injecting all of these variables into a very simple game, you create something that's easily approached and enjoyable, and can become very strategic. In Dog Park, I guess the biggest correlation to Wingspan, aside from the fact that they have a giant deck of different unique cards, is it is a remarkably simple system. You could teach it to a 10-year-old, but then you're going to inject all of these variables that's going to make the game a little bit more convoluted, and like what the strategically wise play turn over turn is. That's all neither here nor there. I try to keep to a schedule, but while Scott is doing the Renaissance Festival and traveling, it does become increasingly more difficult. I try and edit whenever I have time. And my goal is to always have it done like 4 or 5 days before the episode is up, so that if something is wrong or something's off, or I wanted to modify something, there's still time to do so. And if I have a designer on the show, I like to be able to upload it and send it to them so that they can hear our take. If they hear the 8-bit breakdown and we're like, this thing sucks, well, I'll give them the opportunity to say, hey, can we just scrap the episode and you not air it? In which
Or
case I'll say,
modify certain parts, take certain parts out.
if I say bad words and they know that, their game is a kid's game, they might not want that. Now we're a clean show. We don't use language on the show, but just theoretically, if one of us said something that's political, like calling it, oh, that's like the Joe Rogan of podcasts.
Yeah, only
that's their opportunity to say, hey, that could be
only an
perceived the
idiot
wrong way.
would do
Could you
that,
remove that? Yeah, right.
Terrible metaphor.
But much like you, especially lately, the schedule has tended to be all over the place.
Yeah, I'm all over the place as well. I'd love to, as I grow older, I find myself wanting like schedule and structure to balance personal life, home life, work life. I'm in academia as well.
Well, you've got a very busy work life, right?
Schooling, yeah. And so, grad school plus I work, in education, which is something at the time of recording, this is brand new for me. So I'm still kind of in an adjustment period there. Yeah. I'm becoming a day dweller. And so that's everything I had for the interview. So thanks for kind of answering my questions. Like I said, I wanted to just kind of close it out. Mm-hmm. I've got it. You're going to see me look down a lot. I've got it. What we're going to do for those of you watching is, and I ran this by Patrick, kind of, sort of, I didn't really tip him off. So he's going to be Johnny on the spot here. I was thinking about maybe timing you. Let's just get rid of the timer. Let's just make it kind of like fun and not
free form. Okay.
Not make you kind of a sweat. So how it's going to work is I have 12 categories, and I need you to give me 3 games that fit under those categories. Now, I am not the be all end all I'm not Board Game Geek in my head. I'm not going to fact check you. So
I'll make games up if I'm not sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you get stuck, maybe you can just make something up. Or if I'm not familiar with the game, I'll just go, okay. I guess that works.
I'll try. Wait, everybody's they're going to see me for who I really am.
We're going to, for the liar that you, So 12 questions. These are just in my phone here in no order as far as difficulty. I just kind of wrote them down as I was falling asleep last night. So we're going to start off with, each one is going to be 3 games. So I need 3 examples, and the first one's pretty easy. So give me 3 games that are about zombies.
Zombicide, Black Plague, Zombicide, Dark Side.
Good job.
Dawn of the Zeds. Zombies. If you wanted non-zombicide.
Yeah, that one's pretty easy. And so number 2, give me 3 games about food.
Oh, New York Slice. I've drawn. Now I know how the designers feel whenever we do this to them. Coffee Roaster and Coffee Traders.
All right. I also would have accepted like Sushi Go or whatever.
Sushi Go. Yeah,
that's what I thought of. I actually have what's it called? Kitchen Rush. That's another one. That's like
that was a Kickstarter like a year or 2 ago. Is it good?
Yeah, it's hard to explain because it's one of those real-time cooperative games, and so
Oh.
it's like I'm going to hit the timer. Does everyone know what they're doing? Is that, and then you hit the timer, and people just it causes a huge panic attack. So, playing
like I'm
it,
having right now.
I play a 2-player because we both understand the game really well, but it's 2-player doesn't scale very well. I think more players is better. So moving on to number 3,
Let's
should
do
be
it.
quite easy. So I want you to pick different. So no zombie side, but give me 3 games that are based on intellectual property.
Okay. Alien: Fate of the Nostromo,
Mm-hmm.
Legendary Encounters Predator, and Firefly.
You went all like science fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? We're stuck with a theme. So the next one is give me 3 games with reprints. So you know what I mean, right? Older games that are like brought back with a new design, new board, new cover.
Okay. Castles of Burgundy,
Right?
Colosseum. And I want to say Catan has had they're on their 5th or 6th edition, aren't they? Will we take Catan?
I don't follow Catan. I would have accepted Fury of Dracula.
Oh, good one.
Which has like
good
kind of
one.
a newer print. Okay, this one you might struggle with because I know, or at least as far as I know you, and again we don't know each other super well, but 3 games that are word games, like Scrabble, like to deal with like word games. Give me 3 word games.
Upwards. It's like Scrabble, but the tiles can be placed on top of each other. So if you like Scrabble, Upwards is a lot of fun. I got one called Spell Words, which is it's a more of a group, like a party game where you have to link the first and last letter. I don't think catchphrase is technically a spelling, like a word game. How about Anomia? We played one called Anomia where you flip cards and you have to say something like a playwright, Shakespeare, and you have to
there's
challenge
like
the other
symbols on
people.
them.
Yeah.
I played that a long time ago.
I had to like it.
One I recommend just maybe for you or for my audience watching is I really enjoy because I like deck builders. It's called Hardback, and that's one that's really cool where each card is a letter and you're deck building and upgrading your cards, and it uses the legendary system where you can link cards. So blue cards upgrade blue cards and red cards upgrade red cards. If you've ever played Marvel Legendary, they have like certain symbols. Like if you played if you played a green card, then you get both of abilities. You get the top and the bottom of the card as opposed to the top. And it's a word game, so it's kind of like Scrabble but with cards. Anyways, this part's not about me, but I really enjoy Hardback. I mean, played the snot out of that one. So the next one that I'm going to talk about, or we're going to talk about, is give me 3 games about animals. Be pretty easy.
Yeah. Wingspan, Dog Park. I'm going to go with Root. I don't know if Root would count. It's not about the animals, but they're the ones fighting each other.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, Dog Park. I set you up for that one. So we're gonna go with 3 horror games, but not zombies, because we already talked about zombies. So give me 3 good horror games.
Okay, let's go with The Thing, Infection at Outpost 31.
I've not played that. Okay, good one.
Horrified, which now has the Horrified American Monsters. I had the chance to play that just this Halloween, with my buddy Tom at the shop here in town. And Cthulhu, Death May Die.
Cool, good one. Okay, the next one is, you're gonna have to think about this one. 3 games with a person's name in the title of the game. Could be historical, could be just factual. Like, for example, The Rise of Fenris. That would be like a name.
I'll go with Carnegie. I'll go with Newton, and I'll go with Marco Polo.
Oh, dang.
Keeping it historical.
Thought I would trick you up on that one. I was thinking, so I put down for mine, I think I put down Edison versus Tesla, Robinson Crusoe.
Yeah.
I can't remember what else
there's
I had.
A bunch.
So the next one is games with one-word titles. Let's try not to reuse anything.
All right.
Come up with something new. One-word title.
Go, Petrichor, and Eschaton.
I have no clue what any of those are. So
Petrichor you play as a cloud, and Eschaton is like you're bringing about the end of days. Fun little deck builder.
Cool. Okay, let's see. Looking down at my list, let's go with the next one. 3 games that are fantastic, but the artwork or components suck. Games you really love, but you're like, man, this needs a. I'll give you mine. Mine would be like Agricola. I love that game, but I think it could definitely look better.
Okay,
go ahead. Give me 3. Give me 3 that you love that you're like, this needs an update.
Age of Empires 3 is a lot of fun. Absolutely needs updated. It's brown. The game's very brown, which is, we'll say, unfortunate. Thinking. There's the old school version of Brass, if that counts. Brass did get updated and it's much prettier now, but old Brass is one that we used to play that's like, it was like a vomit of color on the board. It was awful.
Is the new one like Brass Birmingham, or is that a
Brass
different
Birmingham
game?
and Brass Lancashire? The old one was just Brass, and Lancashire essentially emulates that. The new one being Brass Birmingham came out a year later, and there's a few modifications as far as like what you need per turn. Third one, a game that I really that's tough. When you love a game, typically you're willing to look beyond poor component quality. No, that one looks good.
You must have some on the wall or something.
I hadn't even thought of that. Let's go with Twa.
It looked like you were looking off like, let's see.
I staring up at the lights up there, and I keep looking up at the light. So let's go with Twa. Troyes, Troyes, Twa. It's I love it, and I don't think the component quality is that bad, but compared with some of the things that we have nowadays, like Nemesis and Zaya and all these big Kickstarters, it kind of, no one's going to look at it on the table and be like, oh, what's that?
I think a lot of mid 2000s heavy Euro games really just kind of took like artwork out and components and stuff. It was just cubes and discs and a lot of pastel colors and stuff. Yeah. Agricola kind of came out in that era, late, what was it, 2000 and something, 7. And so it just doesn't look good to me, but it's a game I really like and I enjoy the theme. So last one that we have before we'll get to our plugs and we'll get to saying goodbye and get on to living our lives. This one should be incredibly easy for you because my audience probably won't know this, but there's a recent conversation that we had. So you should be able to fly through this one. So give me 3 games that are about building a civilization.
Okay. Sid Meier's Civilization. That one's a gimme. Monuments. And one of my personal favorites, Through the Ages, A New Story of Civilization. Absolutely love it. And I expect you to learn it, or at least meet me on BGA tonight or tomorrow or something. If you haven't learned, it's very ghastly to try and learn that thing, but I can give you the rundown. It's actually a lot simpler than it reads.
Yeah, I had to pull up some videos. One that I really enjoy is I don't have Civilization, but I have New Dawn. And I have the New Dawn expansion. I really enjoy it. You play it with the expansion. It really gives the game, I don't know what it does, but it really makes the game really fun. It kind of fills in. Yeah, it fills in a lot of the stuff that just made the game feel kind of like they streamlined the Civ aspect out of it. And then another one, because I'm such a Jamie Stegmaier person, I'm sure you know,
Tapestry.
Yeah, I do. I have the expansion. I do like Tapestry.
I love Tapestry.
I do too. So that's going to be everything that I have. Again, Patrick, thank you for sitting down and talking with me. Go ahead
Oh, it
and
was
just
fun.
feel free to just kind of plug whatever you want to plug, Twitter, your home
Sure.
address, anything you want to give out
My social security.
before we call it.
Well, you can find the Level Up Board Game Podcast on basically any podcast app if you just search us. We have our website is www.levelupgamepodcast.com. My easiest way to plug the Facebook, the Twitter, the Instagram is if you go to our website, they're all little buttons in the top right where you just click the little Twitter emblem. It'll take you right to that page. We're the most active on Facebook among the three, though. You can follow us on BGG. Our BGG guild is Guild 3722. We put up like our upcoming episodes, our meetups, some of the more behind the scenes stuff with the designers, or a Kickstarter coming out, what we were able to find out there. So the guild as well. I think that's it.
All right. Well, once again,
that's my best sign off. I think that was it.
Okay. Well, thanks for sitting down and talking about the podcast and kind of being on my channel. I know I was on your channel not too long ago outside of the Academy segment where we kind of talked about board games.
Yes,
and so
we talked about Goonies was the one you were bringing up for us. Love it.
Yep. So for those of you watching at home, thank you for tuning in. This is where I'm going to leave us for now. Once again, my name is Andrew Davidson, and you've been watching As Per My Ability. I will see each and every one of you at the next video.